that good? Welcome back everybody, my name is Philip and today we will talk HDR. What does that mean? That means today I'm going to show you how you can take three pictures that have been taken at different exposure levels and then combine them in a software that is called Aurora HDR. So we are essentially going to go from this particular image right here to that image using only the Aurora HDR software. Awesome? I know, let's do it. Okay, so if you have never heard of HDR before, not to worry at all. I'm going to link this particular video or this video or wherever it might be in the description as well, and also a link to a very elaborate article that I have composed which has all the information you could ever need when you want to start or if you want to start with HDR photography. In essence, you take three images of different exposures, you throw them in an HDR software or Photoshop or whatever you want to do with it, and you combine them into a single image and you make it pretty to your liking. Now, one of my favorite softwares out there and currently my go-to software is Aurora HDR 2018. If you want to have 10% off, it's down in the description. Just use the promo code Let's Image, and you don't necessarily need this one. You just need any software to actually create HDR photos. Now, in this one, we're going to use Aurora HDR, and I'll say, let's jump right into Aurora, throw in our three images, and then get started. Okay, so first of all, here are our three images. We have the -2 exposure, we have the 0 exposure, and then we have the +2 exposure. So the only thing I did with these images so far is I literally just selected them on my computer and then drag and drop them over into Aurora HDR 2018. Now, once you do that, Aurora is going to ask you, do you want to create an HDR? And of course, in our case, yeah. Make sure you have the alignment button checked, which is quite important if you have, for example, taken the three images handheld, and you want to make sure that they kind of match as well. And then just hit Create HDR. Boom. Now we're going to take a second just to observe what Aurora HDR does, and we're going to maybe get a cup of coffee or something. Or I'll just finish mine for now. And here we are. So if we have a look at the before and after even now without even touching any of the settings, we can definitely see a big difference between the 0 exposure and the HDR version that Aurora comes up with. We can also slide that back and forth. Looks already very beautiful. Now, there are a couple of issues that I do have. First of all, I want to make sure that the attention is actually on the subject as well as the sunset back here. And then it does something kind of weird. Let's zoom in here a little bit and just move up to the top left-hand corner. It does something very weird with these clouds in this particular image because they are completely noisy and grainy. Now, I don't know why this is, but I don't really care because we can definitely fix it simply and easy. So we're going to start by bringing back the details in the top left here. We can simply do that by bringing back one of our original image layers. Remember, we threw all these three pictures into Aurora HDR and it combined them for us. So let's bring a single one back. We're going to click on the little plus on the top right hand corner and we're going to go to Add New HDR Bracketed Layer. Here we're going to choose our 0, our middle picture, and just hit it and wait for it to finish. Okay, so it has now brought our 0 exposure image as a layer into Aurora HDR, which is quite amazing. So what we want to do is we want to essentially take that particular layer that we have just imported again, and we want to only make it visible on the top left-hand corner, because if we do that, we bring back the beautiful sky and not the one that was created by Aurora HDR with all the noise and grain, which probably originated from the dark images or whatever. Doesn't really matter, we're just going to fix it. Now, once we have that particular image as a layer in Aurora, what we're going to do is we're just going to brush it in. We don't even have to brush it in, we could also just use a gradient. So I'm going to click the little brush symbol. I'm going to click on Gradient Mask. Now what I have to do is I have to decide where do I want to make this particular layer visible. So I'm just going to go and drag that gradient in here just like that. I'm going to turn it around a little bit, probably actually, let's reduce it to something like this. Then we're going to drag that over to maybe like that. That's perfect. Something like this. Once I'm done, I'm going to hit the done button, which I did now. Perfect. So now we only have this particular sky in the top left where we actually want it, right? So if we compare that to the before, we can see it's very grainy and noisy. If we compare to the after, it's not quite as bad. However, now these particular layers are not perfectly aligned. So what I'm going to do is I'm also going to grab the brush and I'm just going to make it a little bit larger. I'm going to say erase, and I'm just going to erase that layer that we have just imported from certain areas here. Let's decrease the opacity to 70 or something %. The paint, bring that back here and erase. I'm just going to erase it in the building area. Just like that. Here. Okay. There we go. Okay. Cool. So now Aurora is going to think a little bit and it's going to bring that in. Now what I'm also going to do with this particular layer, I'm going to bring down the exposure just a little bit, just to adapt it to the rest of the image, which is obviously darker, right? So if I could bring it down like this, which I don't want. So I'm just going to bring it down to something like, maybe like this. That kind of fits the scene. Perfect. Cool. So now that we have this corner a little bit better than it was before, I like that way more. Now we're going to take care of the, let's start with the, yeah, why not start with the sunset right here? Let's do it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new layer as usual. I'm going to add a new adjustment layer. And within that adjustment layer, I'm going to bring up the temperature a little bit. Wow, actually that's kind of cool, but we don't want it that much, just like this. And I'm only looking at the top left corner right here, top right corner. Left and right, not my friends. Anyway, then we're going to use a little bit of HDR Enhance, which is also comparable to Clarity in Photoshop or Lightroom or whatever you use. And also we're going to bring up, do we want to bring up anything else? Maybe saturation, let's see how it looks. Oh wow, they're going to go a little bit crazy here. Maybe a little bit, but really just ever so slightly. Okay, perfect. Now that we have that same thing, I'm going to hit the brush, I'm going to go to gradient mask, and I'm going to paint that in, or drag that in rather, into the sky area over here. I'm going to do it to something like that. Okay, I kind of dig that. Perfect. Hit the done button. And now if we check the before and the after, that's the before and that's the after. That's just intensifying the colors just a little bit. Cool. So now what we want to do is I want to brighten up the lower area right here, especially with the subject. So as usual, new layer, new adjustment layer. Let's increase the exposure to something not as bad, to something like that, let's say. Awesome. Once we have that, same thing. I'm going to take the brush, click the gradient mask. I'm just going to bring that in here. So from bottom up, I'm just going to drag and drop. And let's just bring it to something like that, probably. Yeah, maybe let's bring it actually down a little bit. Maybe something like this. Cool, that looks good. And lastly, now that we have made everything brighter at the bottom here, let us just calculate for a second. I want to darken down the lower left-hand corner. So for that, one last adjustment layer and bring the exposure down. Okay, and I'm going to bring it down quite a bit to something like that. Use the brush again, go to gradient mask. I'm just going to bring that in just like that. Okay, now I have to decide how far. Actually, it's maybe make it a bit smaller and drag it in like that. Turn it a little bit to something like that and then bring it down. Yeah, I kind of like that. That's not bad at all. We're going to keep that. We're going to hit the done button. That's perfect. So with that, go away. If we look at the before and the after, we have literally just taken the focus of the image and pushed it towards the calculating process away. Here we go, and pushed it towards the sunset. Now, one other way to do that is I'm going to create one really last layer, promise. And here I'm going to go all the way down in the list of things that I can do. And I'm going to go to vignette. Now here I'm going to increase the vignette like to the dark areas, let's say, to something like that. I'm going to increase the feather and increase the inner brightness. And I'm going to place the center just between the subject and the sunset, just over here. Now, once I do that and it has, yeah, here we go. Now I can bring down the vignette to an amount that I find actually useful for the image. So let's say something like, actually just like that looks nice. And now we can decide how bright we actually want to make that area. Let's make it to something like that. Why not? I like that. That kind of looks cool. Perfect. So let's have another look at the before and the after, and the total before and the total after. And again, these are of course very quick edits and you can take your time way more than I did here. But as a matter of fact, Aurora HDR is awesome because it actually has layers. You can do very quick edits. You can locally specify where you want to put things. Simply love it. And there you go. I hope you did like the video. If you did like the video, do not forget to hit the thumbs up button. And also, if you're new, don't forget to subscribe, as it's going to help me out a lot. I shall see you the next time. I'm going to make another coffee, or maybe... No, I said last time I'm going to build a snowman. I didn't, so this time I'm going to have to build a snowman. But it's so cold. Let's see what's going to happen. Other than that, I wish you happy editing, and I shall see you in the next video. Take care of yourself, and bye!